Welcome to Powering SMB, the premier podcast by XenTegra One.
We're here to turbocharge your journey through the realms of business strategies, emerging technologies, and the secret sauce of customer experience.
Stay tuned as we decode the complexities, celebrate the milestones, and equip you with the tools, inspiration, and cutting-edge insights to skyrocket your business dreams.
This is Powering SMB. Well, hey, we're back. Powering SMB this morning, afternoon, wherever you want to call it. I guess it depends on the time zone you're in. Hey, Sean, What's happening?
Oh, not much. Just another Powering the SMB conversation. So today's topic is about data backups.
Yeah, and most specifically Office 365 backups, right? Which we'll jump into, but a lot of folks think they're covered. And to be perfectly frank, right in the beginning, you're not. You're not at all. You think you got a backup at Microsoft. You are wrong, sir or ma'am.
Yeah, and I
does not exist.
I'd like to do my impression. So I talk to a lot of business owners, and a lot of folks that I see that are, have younger businesses, not fully mature. They don't have an IT team yet, but they might have 30, 50, 60 employees at this point, right? Their general impression is, hey, look, I don't have servers. Everyone here has a computer, but everything we're using is software as a service, right?
Yep.
It's my CRM is on one thing. I have these tools over here. Everything's Office 365 or Google. I don't really need IT. Everything is fine, right? But we all know that they're not really taking into consideration any sort of identity management or permissions or policy or data backups or really protecting their business. And some of these places are, $50 to $100 million a year businesses. And they're not really seeing the forest through the trees and understanding, well, this is what pays my bills every day. This is what powers my business. My data is important to this. And if anything were to go sideways, is my butt covered, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And it's funny because it's such a uniform reaction. Everything that I just described is exactly what I hear over and over and over and over and over again, right? Like, yeah, I guess you could manually set up and schedule patching and updates to happen on the desktops, and that's probably all they're really thinking about, right? So we just want to make sure that people are basically have this insurance policy, that they are covering their own butts. If something were to go sideways, that they have a plan to go and fix it.
Absolutely. And especially with Office 365. I think what you've just described, I'd have to agree 100% with you. Most of the customers that we're seeing, especially in the SMB space, are startups or smaller companies that are embracing SaaS at a level that they haven't in the past, right? They're doing most of their workload in the cloud through a software as a service solution, a subscription, as it were. And the assumption, I think, a lot of times with these folks is that, hey, I'm doing myself the smartest thing possible. I'm not keeping any of my data local. I'm pushing it up in the cloud. What could go wrong? And I understand to a certain degree their thinking behind that. But what I think that, and hopefully someone from Microsoft doesn't listen to this podcast, but I'll be honest. I think that Microsoft does a pretty crappy job of explaining to people that, hey, yeah, we're going to host your data, but we're also not responsible for your data. And I feel like that is something that a lot of people, frankly, they just don't understand that that's the reality of the situation, right? You're paying for a service, you're putting your data up there. They're holding onto the data, they're keeping it available to you. But what they're not doing is they're not backing it up. They're not backing it up in the way you would expect them to. There's a whole data governance piece here that Microsoft clearly does explain, but I don't think that explanation, frankly, falls over people's head. It goes right over their head. They don't realize that, hey, Microsoft has told me they're not holding onto my data. And really, the way you really need to think about this is if you are going to store most of your data up there, especially emails, SharePoint data, OneDrive data, team stuff, right? The whole Microsoft suite, which is awesome. We're users of it ourselves, love it. But if something were to happen to that data in Microsoft's tenant, there's no going back. There's no backup. There's no, recovery plan. And if you're a business that has to deal with compliancy in any, measure, which is most people nowadays, it seems like you can't get around it. You're going to need to be able to provide, uh, you know, receipts, so to speak, when people come knocking, right? I did this on this date, and here is my proof that I did it. If you don't have that data when the auditor man comes knocking, that's going to be a real problem. And having a way to be able to look at that data also is another part of that.
You know,
So I
what's a
think the
funny
topic's a great topic for this week.
it's a funny thing because I live in a world personally where I'm surrounded by lawyers. I have a lawyer in my family, and just for, if anyone doesn't know this, if you work on a case in legal, you have to hold the physical assets for life, or at least a very long time. So my entire garage is stacked up with these legal documents and these legal books, et cetera, et cetera. But I meet with a lot of lawyers that might be doing that, but they're not doing anything to protect their digital data. And it's I don't want to pick on lawyers, but I feel like they're the last person, maybe doctors too, the last people to ever pay attention to these types of scenarios. Um, but yeah, and the other part too is Microsoft 365 is becoming a massive ecosystem. And we've selected this specific blog here. And it's here is one more reason you need to back up Microsoft 365. So I think there's an ecosystem that they have in there that has 50 different API connections for 50 different services that all fall under that umbrella. And this is already 6 months old. So who knows how much it's evolved ever since then, right? And you were just talking about, the cloud. I've had this saying that I've used forever, and it always historically pertained to infrastructure. And that is the cloud is not a destination, it's a tool, right?
Yep. Yeah,
So,
that one. I've heard you tell that one
yes,
a few times.
I have infrastructure, I have data, I have applications. I need a place to park it. I need a tool to help facilitate that for me. It doesn't mean that any of the traditional controls or processes or best practices that you normally would have done, not in the cloud, would be any different.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. But that's the misconception that most people have is they assume by going to that route that they're going to be covered, right? And 365, I don't want to make seem like we're picking on them in particular, but they are the big target if you really think about it, right? SharePoint, Mail, OneDrive, Teams, all of that are such commonplace apps in most people's lives nowadays. I think a lot of folks, when they buy those services, just assume that it's going to be backed up, which is not. There are services like we're talking specifically today about Veeam for Office 365. Phenomenal product, right? It goes out, touches your organization, takes all of that data and brings it down locally so that you have a copy, an actual backup of all of your data that's in the cloud, local. Local is a relative term, right? Could be at Wasabi, could be local prem, could be a lot of different places. But the idea here is that you have a secondary backup that is not directly attached to Microsoft, which is huge.
Yeah.
You need that in today's environment, right? If you need to recover data, you need a tool to be able to do that. And this is something that people don't necessarily think about, and they should.
Yeah. So
Uh,
so today's blog is from Veeam. It is a
okay.
Veeam publication themselves. It's talking about their features. It's clearly biased, but we love Veeam. Veeam has been part of a very, very important cog in our stack for a very, very long time right now. We use it for server infrastructure. We use it for cloud infrastructure. We use it for applications. We use it for Office 365. So when we take over our clients, we are essentially, for the most cases, we are taking over the tenant for Office 365 as well too. So we provide full management for that. And in all cases, we are tacking on Veeam backup for Office 365.
Yep. In every
Simple as
case.
that. It's
Yep.
just a standard default thing that we're doing. We have invested heavily into Veeam over the years. We have our own infrastructure for We have a disaster recovery site in Reno, Nevada, and a bunch of data sitting over there that is managed and sourced and backed up through Veeam. So they're our vendor of choice today to read about this. So I am going to read through the blog, and then we'll
Cool.
provide commentary on it. So that was kind of the preface. It's pre-summarizing what we're going to get into. This is specifically about the new integration that they have with Microsoft Syntex. So that's going to be an interesting topic too, because Syntex falls into the AI conversation, which falls into the Copilot conversation and the generative AI conversation that everybody wants to have these days, et cetera, et cetera. So this is in a way going to explore best practices in data protection around those types of systems, which of course are all incorporated into the Microsoft 365 platform. Like I mentioned, it's a beast. Started off as basically email and a couple tools and evolved into 50 plus different services now.
Yep. Yep. And it only grows every day.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to be Microsoft's main thing going forward. I mean, they got a very, very strong hold on that segment of the market as they always have. Um, so yeah, so here we go. I'm going to dive right into it. It's a very short blog, and I'm going to it references some other blogs that they have too, so I will jump between a couple of them. But here we go. Veeam folks, Veeam marketing folks speaking. It's amazing to see validation, innovation, and adoption of all the hard work at Veeam products team have put in over the years. It seems like just yesterday that we launched Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 products. In November of 2016, Veeam went on a new space protecting this critical data service. So there it is. It has been 8 years, less than 8 years, and the adoption is continuing to grow because we do see almost 100% of our clients using Microsoft 365. Before they talk to us, there's no backups there, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. I
clearly,
don't think
even
I've
though this
ever
is
ran into a situation where a customer that we brought on with Office 365 had a backup solution in place before they met us, which
exactly,
is
yeah,
kind of crazy and somewhat terrifying at the
yeah.
same time.
So Veeam, I mean, they are the absolute, one of the absolute leaders in this space. Been 8 years. I guarantee you, they had it there before most people.
Yeah,
So
I remember running the original product, the V1. We've been using this product literally since it was announced. We were probably a Veeam shop, I want to say 5, 6 years before that. So probably somewhere around 2010, maybe ish. We became a Veeam partner full time.
yeah,
But yeah, it's definitely, I remember when this product came out and even myself included, I'm not going to lie, in 2016, when this product first came out, I said, why do we need that? Certainly Microsoft is backing this stuff up, and then, you know, read the fine print. And yeah, even I was a little bit shell shocked, like, oh, yeah, okay, I guess I never thought of that. I guess that's not something they're going to do for us. This is a needed product. So there you go.
exactly.
Yeah,
But you know, we've seen the light, and fast forward 8 years, this information is not making its way down to the average consumer, average business owner.
totally agree.
They need an IT director or somebody in house with experience to kind of show them the way. So, getting back into the body of this, over the years, we've added the product both in service protection for Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, OneDrive, et cetera, as well as hit incredible scale. So clearly, they're bringing on a lot of business. There are many large organizations around the world backing up tens of thousands of users, and Veeam Cloud and service provider partners backing up hundreds of thousands of users as well. Aside from the reach of this product, it's also amazing to realize that there are now 50 plus different recovery options within Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365.
And you got
So,
to ask yourself, do you understand what they're saying there a little bit, right? When they say 50 different recovery options, like literally, there's things that you probably have never thought about that you would need in a recovery. Imagine this, right? You have a lawyer that calls and knocks on your door and says, hey, man, you're involved in a lawsuit, and we have a discovery document that came in and says you need to give us every piece of email across your entire organization that has these keywords from these individuals during this date range. Uh, how do you think most admins are going to grab that data? Do you think it's an easy task? Like that's one example I can give you because I know because we deal with this kind of thing all the time. But that's a fairly complex thing. With Veeam, that's a recovery option. It's literally something we can do. Like say, okay, here's the parameters that we need to look at. We can cross search these mailboxes, dump that into another PST, which then we can provide as part of that discovery. If you didn't have that tool, that would be rough, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the whole covering your butt conversation, right?
Right.
We've
Yeah.
seen it where folks can't even if someone access data, maybe not necessarily backing it up, but even accessing it, we haven't been able to show logs on who had access to what because people aren't taking the very basics of identity management or architecting a system with checks and balances in it. Veeam and backup is a component of that, but I mean, there's this whole large picture of why you still need IT when you're just a SaaS shop, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it just keeps I'm going to beat that drum nonstop. So my apologies in advance.
Yeah, I just think it's funny when they say 50 different recovery options. It just makes me think like there's so many things you haven't even thought about until you ran into the situation where, there's another scenario that is looming around the corner that you would never even grasp, especially when you're talking about like SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams. There's data being kept in all these different ancillary SaaS apps that's part of the Office 365 ecosystem that if an employee leaves, let's say even, right? You might need to recover some of that employee's data and move it to another individual within the organization. And doing that through the Microsoft tool set's not that simple. Doing it through Veeam, if you have a backup, tends to simplify that process a little bit easier, right? They've got literally like wizards and GUIs that can walk you through some of these weird scenarios that hopefully you don't deal with every day, but when the time comes, it's nice to know that it's there.
And if you're working with the Veeam CSP partner like us, you can just basically ask them to do all that for you.
Yeah, suddenly becomes our problem.
Yeah,
And I'm glad there's 50 different recovery options for that exact reason as well. Yep.
yeah, yeah. And you think about it, if just running that system, the various different ways that you can share data with folks,
Yeah.
whether it's through Teams or through OneDrive or through SharePoint, um, how you grant that access, how long it lasts, all that kind of stuff. I mean, there's so many different checks and balances that fall into this giant platform. So there we go. Going to keep reading now. It's also important to remember Veeam's business model of having partnerships is central to so much of what we do. You can see this across the business with our thousands of pro partner resellers around the world, Veeam Cloud service providers offering backup Microsoft 365 powered by Veeam. Alliance programs with technology leaders in the space and more. So basically, that's what we do. So we're a cloud CSP. We license them. We then become a backup as a service or disaster recovery as a service partner powered by Veeam. That's basically what they're trying to say there. Back to the text. I've said for a long time that partnerships is in Veeam's DNA. And this week at the Microsoft Inspire, where they wrote this from, we're embarking on a significant next step with Microsoft 365 Backup. We're happy to share that Veeam will be building on the Microsoft collaboration and leverage with the new Microsoft 365 Backup APIs with Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365. Now, this is in context with the release of Microsoft Syntex. So that's where this article's going. It's kind of blindly leads you there, I guess. But that's basically the next segment here. So they're going to get into Syntex. So clearly, this is another component of Microsoft 365. So we're talking about backing up this specific segment. Most people are probably thinking Teams, OneDrive, and SharePoint, that kind of thing. But Microsoft Syntex is basically a document management system. It's AI powered. It can integrate with Copilot, so you can do language gestures, et cetera, et cetera. Mark, any comment on that?
Yeah, I kind of wonder, based on the age of this document, unfortunately, it's probably that this is probably rolled up into Copilot to a certain degree. Syntax still exists,
Yeah.
but it's more of a collection of tools that go around what will eventually be Copilot, and Copilot will probably overtake this product in general. But it's the idea of having, let's say 6 or 8 silos within your Microsoft universe that you're constantly dealing with, be it SharePoint, OneDrive, Office 365, and being able to then have workflows and documents and being able to create new documents based off of templatized versions of documents that are in your document store, and then having it's a whole thing. It's really, really cool. But I kind of think that probably some of this, so we're in a weird time right now, right? Like Copilot is changing how you use apps at a way that I mean, in a rate of speed and a way of thinking that is going to be so different. Even 3 months from now, it's going to be different. Um, it, I don't know where I'm going with this, other than, it's great that they're supporting the ecosystem, but I'm sure that the underpinning is going to be there. But I don't think people will know Microsoft syntax from anything like 6 months from now. Is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, if you're just constantly asking a
The
robot.
only thing, the only thing you're going to be hearing about when you hear the word AI in Microsoft is Copilot. There's just
Oh,
there's no other thing that's going to be there. Uh,
yeah.
it might be that Copilot is talking to all these different ancillary services that they supply the end user, but at the end of the day, people are just going to say, "Oh yeah, I tell Copilot to do this, and magically it happens." Uh, that's all they want to think about.
Yeah. So this article is 6 months old. So yeah, I think you're good
Yeah,
on
six
with that.
months might as be 60 years at this
Yeah.
rate, especially with the rate we're moving right now. But I mean, it's still interesting stuff. It's great technology, and it's really cool if you've ever seen it. You got to search up Microsoft Syntax if you haven't looked at it. Anybody that's listening to this, it's very cool the things you can do. But like I said, I think a lot of that functionality and feature set that they're touting, the end user isn't going to really be seeing it from that application as much as it's just going to be a feature of Copilot that's built in. I was just in Punta Cana last week at the NerdioCon event, and a lot of the people, that's all they can talk about is Copilot this, Copilot that. Everybody's integrating Copilot with every one of their apps. Um, the value is absolutely there. I mean, I see it. I totally see it. It's just scary to me how quickly we're all relying on the man or the machine to tell us what to do or how to do it. It's almost spooky in a
Go
way.
speak to the Oracle. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So here from this is how Veeam describes what is Microsoft Syntax. So Syntax is a powerful cloud content management solution that brings AI, automation, and management to the everyday business workflows. There are several impressive aspects of Syntax, such as models for content, custom and pre-built, content assembly, content query, content processing, and more. Syntax helps customers make sense of the influx of content coming into an organization. As you can imagine, this growth of content coming into Microsoft 365 requires secure and scalable management. So before we got on this, I was doing some research to make sure I wasn't talking completely out of my butt on understanding what this tool is. And, it's new to me. So me personally, as a sales focused individual, had not come across this, but there was a nice video on YouTube with Microsoft, and they do I guess you do it like a customer testimonial, and it was with TaylorMade Golf, who we know is a in our backyard here in Carlsbad, Southern California. And they did a little quick video on it, and essentially this tool is being leveraged by their in-house legal team. So going right back to lawyers, the massive amounts of files, revisions, and different documents that they're dealing with, their challenge was they needed to manage that data, and the lawyers were spending all their time changing a document, putting it somewhere, revising it, moving it to another place, and it was highly unorganized. And this system allows them to do that extremely and significantly more efficiently, especially when it comes to searching specific things where you can query 8 different keywords, et cetera, to come and find it.
Yeah.
It also
How
has
cool is
like,
that?
yeah, it also has like like an e-sign capability, and it tracks all the different workflows and all that kind of stuff into it. So definitely really cool. And, it's this thing we always say, we can automate it so you guys can just focus on doing your work, and the lawyers can actually just be lawyers instead of managing data, which is ridiculous. So it solves that problem for them. So it's a cool testimonial that's up on YouTube. If you just type in Syntax and Microsoft, it's going to be one of the top things that pops up. So going back to their text here, Microsoft made a number of announcements at Microsoft Inspire. This was last summer. And one of them is that Microsoft 365 Backup, a Syntax offering for Microsoft 365 with a new API, is part of the news at the event. Veeam is excited to be building on our longstanding Microsoft collaboration with the new APIs that Veeam will have access to for Microsoft 365 data. So there you go. One more reason.
If you didn't have 10 already, yeah, now there's another one.
Yeah. So yeah, it's essentially what it is they're trying to tell the world that we have a partnership with Microsoft. A lot of your data is going to be in Microsoft, whether it's in their cloud infrastructure or Office 365 or both. And the people, the other vendors that provide this ecosystem, Veeam being this vendor, is working with them specifically to make sure the checks and balances and best practices are easily facilitated through this. So there we go. So now we've talked about all this crazy stuff. Now they start talking about, why do I need to back up Microsoft 365?
Yeah, was my 2-second spiel at the very beginning of the hour of this podcast, right? Why? Because Microsoft is not covering your butt. That's why. They're going to deliver the data, they're going to house it, they're going to let you manipulate it. But the one thing they are not going to do, and I think they honestly could do a little bit better job of explaining this to folks, is they're not backing it up. Your data is your data, right? It's sitting there, but there is no backup by default in place that you can quickly grab and recover and look at stuff offline. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, and I know that's a difficult concept for a non-technical person that's never had to recover data to kind of grasp, because whether it's in the cloud or whether if it's on premise or whatever it might be, not the average business owner hopefully has not had to deal with, a critical emergency or a lawsuit or a rogue employee or some kind of crazy thing like that, right?
Yep.
So now Veeam kind of, in my opinion, I think they kind of wrote this backwards, but they're going to start going into, why this type of protection is important. We're going to read through what they're saying, but then also kind of comment on it as we go. So here we go. Do I need to back up Microsoft 365? That's the question everybody's asking, right?
If you've been listening this long and you haven't figured out the answer to this, but go on. Yeah.
Yes, the first word is yes. The fact is, we at Veeam have been advocating for several years that you do need to back up Microsoft 365 data. The announcement from Microsoft Inspire is a solid validation of that. In fact, we still advocate that there are 7 reasons for you that you need to protect Microsoft 365. We have built a significant part of our product strategy for Microsoft 365 around that shared responsibility model, which we have visually here. So basically it's, a checks and balances thing where they say, we're responsible for holding your data and providing this application and this infrastructure, blah, blah, blah. You're responsible for doing best practices from an IT perspective. Before I get there, I'm going to jump to, because they do have a link to their.
Yeah, I was going to say,
reasons.
I hope you're going to go into the 7 reasons, because this one I would be curious to see if I agree with all of these or if I can add a couple more.
All right. So how about this, Mark? I will only read the 7, and then maybe you comment on a specific use case or opinion about these.
Fair
so
enough.
Here it is. The 7 reasons why we're backing up Microsoft 365. Accidental deletion.
Yeah. Number 1. Yeah, if I were playing Family Feud, that would definitely be number 1 by a long shot.
Yes.
Everybody does it, man. I mean, it's such a common thing.
Yeah, so basic common sense here. Accidental deletion, modification, or overwriting of data can be catastrophic. With a backup solution, you can quickly recover lost data and maintain business continuity. I mean, we've seen people that are in a mobile app, whether they're in a file storage or an email, and they fat finger and absolutely delete like half their inbox or a whole bunch of stuff because, I don't know, maybe your kid got a hold of it and they're playing in the app and something happens, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I pulled our help desk ticket queue over the last year and looked for this exact scenario, I got to think it's a pretty decent number, right? Didn't think about it to pull it in time, but I mean, it would have been an interesting number because yeah, it definitely happens all the time. It's the number one most common thing for sure.
Yep. Cool. So the next one is retention policy gaps and confusion. So Microsoft's retention policies can be complex to understand and implement correctly, leaving your data at risk of loss after the retention policy expires. So this is exactly what we were talking about earlier, Mark. Maybe you want to comment the legal
Misconfigured.
hold.
So inbox is misconfigured. They have this rule in place that says, hey, after 6 months, I don't care about the data. Well, that's all great and dandy, but like, do you think most people might need that data after a certain point of time? I'm gonna guess they will.
Well, the
And
user may not care.
user might not care or even think about it, right? It's not unless you're working in a industry that's fairly regulated, you wouldn't know that you're supposed to be keeping this data for so long. But generally, the problem that I see with this one, and this is a fairly common one too, is that the person that sets up the accounts initially doesn't understand that they are held to a standard, and then they have these retention policy thinking, well, okay, if it's not over a couple months old, I don't need it, and then they find out, later that they did need it, and they have no way of getting that back. At
Well,
least,
how many times have we met someone who, hey, who set up your email for you? How'd you get some of Office 365? Well, yeah, I met this guy in the elevator that does this kind of thing, and he came in, he did it for us cheap.
yeah,
Did that
yeah.
guy actually take the time and or have the experience to ask the questions to understand the business cases and the business needs to set and define policies around these things? So
They're
that's
not, or they did it themselves. I mean, I see that one honestly
yeah.
more common. I'm a startup. I'm software developer team. I've got 5 guys. I'm trying to build the next new app, right? And yeah, email, I need it. So I got it for my employees and we're rolling,
Who set up your Office 365 for you? Oh yeah, GoDaddy did
Go daddy. They're not going to be sponsoring this podcast. That's for sure. Yeah, I hear you. But yeah, that's a good one. Retention policy, absolutely. If you don't have it set or you don't understand, you could end up shooting yourself in the foot pretty easily.
Yeah. Okay. So next one, internal security threats. The risk of internal threats like disgruntled employees deleting essential data is real and can't be ignored. A backup solution provides a safeguard in these situations.
Yeah,
Now, anecdotally, we've had clients that have reached out to us after something bad has happened, where they've had no controls in place, had no backups, and just made the same casual assumption that everything's okay and I don't need to worry about that. So we have seen the aftermath of what happens when a disgruntled employee comes in here and seriously jacks up a business. And the unfortunate part about this is if they didn't have any controls in place and someone did something malicious and they had some sort of what's the word, like a legal repercussion that they maybe wanted to do against these people, I mean, they're out of luck
yeah.
because they don't have a log. They don't have any basic information to show or any controls showing who did what when. Um, so yeah, I mean it's a very large coverage of a such thing, but yes, it happens. People get upset at their employers.
Happens all the time. Not that we aren't the nicest people in the world to work for. We are. So that, luckily, I'm knocking on some wood. That's never happened here. But I mean, it does happen. I've seen it happen plenty of times, especially, you think of like salespeople, right? Sometimes, people go through cycles, 2, 3 years, they're working in a company and then their book of business dries up for whatever reason. They try to take some of that data with them when they're leaving, and then they try to burn their trail or keep their tracks hidden, so they're deleting a bunch of data. That kind of crap happens a lot. Like it's definitely having the ability to recover from that if somebody goes postal within your organization. That's probably a good idea.
Yeah, probably should never trust your employees, quite honestly.
Yeah, no, I mean it's sad, but kind of probably true if you're a business owner. Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, having backups, having copies, having paper trails, and then also basic IT controls in place are absolutely paramount for this specific situation.
Yep.
All right. Now we move from internal to external security threats. Malware, ransomware that can do significant damage to your organization's data and reputation. Regular backups ensure an uninfected copy of your data is always available for recovery. So one thing that's cool about Veeam is as the data is being ingested into the backup volumes, it does scan for malware and basically has its own security measures built into it. We don't ever really talk about those cool features in it, but their technology is so advanced that that stuff is all kind of built in.
Yep.
Um, but
And
clearly, this is the threat that everyone talks about.
right.
And we
It's
don't have
most
any
common.
shortage of ransomware stories that are out there.
Oh, most common attack vector too. Like I said, I was just at a conference last week. They were talking about the number one way that ransomware specifically is getting into an organization. Guess what? It's from email. It's always from email. You know, they're a lot of times they're exfiltrating their way in by pretending to be someone else within your organization, asking for some information, which then allows them to gain access. And once they're in, then that's when the real trouble begins. But yeah, email easily the number one attack vector for that sort of thing. So something to think about for sure.
Yeah. And of course, best practices from an IT perspective are also paramount in understanding on how to, set this up. We could talk about on this topic, if you're looking to get cybersecurity insurance, I mean, there's about 15 very specific checkboxes that they're looking for. Backups are one of them, you know.
For sure.
It's very, very specific things they're looking for in there, but clearly backups are on that list. Because if you do get ransomware and you lose your company or you are getting extorted for $1 million or whatever it might be, your insurance is going to make do their due diligence to make sure that you were following best practices. Otherwise, your policy is pretty much void. And they will
Yeah.
have their guys come in there and they will ask for the logs and they will make sure that you can prove that you were doing things the right way. Because if you're not, you're into the bargain of, where we're talking about the line of delineation, what we're responsible, what you're responsible for was definitely not followed through.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a woman 3 days ago that used to run a large organization. And a large relative, with 250 employees, something like that. I mean, this is SMB, but still pretty good size, company.
Yeah.
Didn't thought they had all their check boxes done, everything working great. She, ran into a crypto kind of thing where they basically ransomwared her entire organization. She was not able to recover from that. And it was, a $3 million mistake. And unfortunately, she had to pay that out of pocket personally because she didn't have enough controls in place to satisfy her cyber insurance to pay. So yeah, it does happen. And it's backups have to be in place regardless, especially if you're in a compliant, any kind of compliancy situation, which is most of us nowadays. Like you just need
Yeah.
to have.
Even if you're not, you still need to be,
Yeah,
just
I
for the
mean, what's your
exact same
business
reasons
worth?
we talked about. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
you have these very defined frameworks, and they're for the most part they're all basically the same, and you're beholden to them if you need to do business in a certain space, right? But at the end of the day, it's still defining best practices.
correct. Yep, you're
And if
absolutely
you're
right.
running your business and your business generates millions of dollars, um, employs people that are taking care of their families and all that kind of stuff, like you got to understand what's at risk and make sure that you have the best policies and procedures in place to do that, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah,
yeah, external threats obviously a major concern for any business owner, um, and that's why we're here trying to educate folks. So the next bullet here is legal and compliance requirements. A robust backup solution can keep your company out of legal trouble by allowing you to retrieve data as required for legal and compliance purposes. So we pretty much touched on this one already.
yep,
Legal hold or legal, reasons specific to your industry or some sort of regulatory authority dictates that you need to do this because you still need to cover your own butt and you are beholden to best practices through that. So exactly what we are just talking about. If you do have some sort of authority mandating that you do this, you probably should be. If you don't, you probably should be too.
Yeah, exactly.
Um, Next one, managing hybrid email deployments and migrations. So the right Microsoft 365 backup solution should be able to handle hybrid email deployments, making the source and location irrelevant. So I think that's more of just an additional value when it comes towards the complexity of systems in their IT delivery.
Yeah, yeah. To me, that's just another way of saying, I don't care where your data's at, you still got to back it up.
Yeah,
You know, doesn't matter whether it's on-prem, it's up in the cloud, whatever. It's still your data. You still need to back it up.
exactly. Yeah. Next one, kind of in that category too, Teams data structure. The Microsoft Teams backend is much more complex than many realize. With this added layer of complexity, ensuring that data is adequately protected is paramount.
Heck yeah. Big heck yeah. I wouldn't have thought about this one even myself up until, post COVID, right? During COVID. You, you don't realize how much data that you're sharing within Teams. You think of Teams as just a conversation like we're sitting here having right now, right, with a group. But think of like I get on staff meetings every day. And what do we do when we're in a staff meeting? We're looking at a PowerPoint document or we're looking at an Excel spreadsheet or something, which is linked to that specific ongoing Teams meeting, right? So if something were to happen to that Teams setup, where's all that data that we've been sharing throughout the last 2 years or 3 years or whatever on these calls, right? We have documents specifically within our organization where we're updating them in real time as we're in a Teams meeting, and that document is being kept within Teams. If you're not backing that up, something happens. And I don't think people think about that. I never really gave it much thought until we started really collaborating in Teams in a bigger way. And then, you got to think about, where's that data being kept, or how's it being backed up, and that stuff can be complicated.
Exactly.
The larger the organization, the more it becomes an issue.
Yeah. So those are the 7 reasons, and then they cap it off with the frequency of data loss incidents. Data loss incidents are far too common. In a recent survey by ESG, 53% of IT professionals admitted their organizations had experienced data loss or corruption in their SaaS applications. It's worth noting that less than 25% of organizations are able to recover 100% of their Microsoft 365 data during a data loss incident, making the need for backups all that more pertinent. So there you go. The cherry on top. It's
Yep.
happening. It's a real issue. Um, and folks need to think about it.
Yep. I feel like we've beaten a dead horse a little bit on this today.
Yeah.
We talk about you need to back up, you need to back up. But I mean, I think, if you can take anything away from this, dude, if you have Microsoft 365, you need to back up.
Yeah.
And if you
We
haven't
could beat
thought
it. We
about
could
it,
beat a
well,
dead horse, but our narrative at the same time is also talking about basic best practices, right?
yes, agreed.
So, we're if anything, we can provide what's the word, but like maybe like a perspective, right? We could talk about the real-time things that we've seen and why this is important. And I want you to say, like, Veeam backups, it's not very expensive.
No,
When
God,
you
no.
take a look at, the cost, it's not a cost prohibitive thing. And, data storage in the cloud where you can stick these things is extremely competitive these days. So we have these various tools where we can put data and move to different places, protect it in various different ways. I mean, it's an art form and a science that's become somewhat commoditized and very efficient.
And it gets easier every year. I mean, there weren't as many options when that product was in V1. Now that we're in like V7 or
Evan, I
some
think, yeah.
number, I think we're on 7 now. Yeah, I mean, you have got a million different repositories you can stick that data. Me, myself, I'm a huge proponent of Wasabi. If you guys don't use Wasabi, you should definitely look at it. It's a object store, makes immutable backups real super easy to do, and it is ridiculously cheap
Yeah.
compared to a lot of other vendors out there.
It's a flat rate of like $7 a month for a
Yeah,
terabyte.
terabyte. Yeah, I mean, how you can't go wrong. You can't beat that. Um, yeah, I'm not really talking about Wasabi today, but heck, I'm gonna give them a plug anyways. They rock. It's great stuff. Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see if Veeam starts to have licensing or modules like this for other SaaS applications, because that's something we've started seeing ourselves too.
Yeah, like we have a problem with Veeam right now that they don't back up G Suite. So we went to another vendor, a company called Red Store, which is another great backup vendor. They're good, real good. And when it comes to G Suite, frankly, I haven't found anybody better. Those guys rock. It's a great product. If you have a G Suite environment, which some people do, it's not, I'd say, as common, let's say, as Microsoft, obviously, but there is a certain user base that seems to prefer G Suite over anything else. That's the product that we use to do the exact same thing in Office 365 because, again, Google is not pretending that they're backing up their data. They basically say it's a repository for your data, but it's up to you to keep control of it. And we use Red
Exact
Store.
same conversation, just a SaaS
Exactly.
application.
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
we've also seen, and Red Store is a good partner. We also partner with a company called Haiku, and they're
Great.
both of these groups are exploring APIs with large SaaS platforms. So we're seeing NetSuite, Salesforce.com, things. I mean, think about it too. I mean, what are you running in? Like, that's all your finances, all
Heck
your
yeah.
clients, like your
Dude,
entire
if you're not backing
operation.
up Salesforce to an outside party, you're out of your mind too. Not only is that product, complicated and expensive to run, and you a lot of times have to, have a development team to help you put it together. Quick plug to our modern apps practice that does that. But like, it's a complicated beast, and if you're not backing it up, man, you're just not doing yourself a service. And any SaaS app that way should be considered. If you're running something as a SaaS app in your organization, the bottom line, if you can take anything out of today's call, just make sure you have a copy of it somewhere else. And the one thing I noticed, okay, that 1.7, right? The one that I think is missing out of all of those, and this is pretty ridiculous, but I'm going to say it anyways. What just happens if Microsoft just has a major meltdown, right? I mean, I'm knocking on wood. I hope it never happens. Uh, but that being said, like what if they had a failure of gigantic proportions and your data is SOL with it? At least if you have a copy off site, you have something to reference back. I mean, I can tell you how many times I've had Teams not work in the last 2 weeks. I've had other issues with Microsoft products. It's luckily their outages are few and far between, but they do have them. But what happens if a 0-day exploit just takes them offline and rails them for 2 weeks?
Yeah. Or, I mean, you could think about, cyber, but even, think of the size of their operation and how it would impact every single organization on Earth. And if you just want to get super morbid and you start thinking about, someone that wanted like a terrorist type of attack. I mean, if someone really wanted to go after Microsoft, it's such a big target. I know they're gonna have the best guards in
Yeah,
the
thank God
whole
they have the
world, but
best guy. Yeah, they've got some of the best people in the world working for them, trying to prevent that exact scenario. But I'm sure that that is something that they're thinking about every single day. How could they not, right?
well,
They
yeah,
are
they
the
have one
biggest
giant bank
attack
that everyone
surface.
put their money in the entire world, right?
Yeah. Yep. I try not to go that far, but I do, it does run through my mind like, hey, if I couldn't access my mail for a week and I absolutely needed it for some reason, there was something I had to have. I'm sure if that's kind of the joke too, is like if the whole world was burning down, would anyone really care about any of this stuff? Probably not. But eventually they would. And eventually you'd have to figure out how you're going to get it back. At least this is just another way of saying, hey, I'm covered in case of some ridiculous kind of scenario happening.
Yeah.
Probably never going to
We're
happen.
slightly dependent on technology as a society.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It would be a weird world not to have all of this stuff online. If everything went offline at the same time, I think half of the world wouldn't know what to do anymore.
All right. Yeah. We got to figure out how to go out on a positive note now.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I really shouldn't have probably went that deep or dark, but
We always want to sell with doom and gloom and
no, we
fear
don't. We don't.
mongering. Yeah.
Bottom line is you want to make your life easier. Let's just leave it at that, right? Like I think these tools, having something like this in place makes your life easier when unforeseen events happen, and they will happen. It's not if they will, it's when they will. Uh, Having a backup strategy is the right move. It's a difference between losing a couple of nights sleep because you don't know how to tell someone you don't have their data versus, oh yeah, dude, I got you covered. I'm gonna restore this right now and you're set. Easy pleasy. And like I said, it's cost effective. It's not gonna cost you a fortune. Just do it. Just understand that you need to do it. They're not doing it for you. If you need help doing it, hey, I know a guy. I know a couple guys.
Yeah. So yeah, like in summary, we know we need to do it. Can't trust them. Back up your data. It's the same old story. Doesn't matter where it's stored. Two, Veeam is an absolute leader in this space.
They are. We love them.
And what they've done is they've enabled partners to grow businesses around their technologies to help companies, basically thrive. So that's the whole model between the Veeam CSP model. So what that means is we license their software, we provide it as a solution, we provide the backup targets, and we manage all that for you. So that's a large component of what we do, and we highly recommend backing up Microsoft 365.
Yeah. You focus on the core. Let us deal with the chore. I don't know where we came up with that one, but I do like that one. Yeah, let us deal with the backups. We'll take it from there. Sweet.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's a perfect way to sign out.
Agreed. I think that was a good one. Look forward to talking to you guys again sometime soon, and we'll see you around on Powering SMB. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for the attention.
Bye bye.